Okay, why don't we get started? Welcome, everyone. My name is Arthur Samuelson. I'm the program director here at the Rowe Conference Center. We are located in Western Massachusetts. Kim is in the Bay Area. My colleague, Fia Alexander is in New Hampshire, and Hillary Goodridge and Michelle are both from the Boston area. So welcome, everyone. Let me tell you very quickly a little bit about Rowe. How many of you have actually been to us? Do I see a few hands? Well, we've been here in Western Massachusetts for almost 100 years. We run summer camps for kids and for adults. And then the rest of the year, we run weekend workshops on the things we think go into making for a flourishing life. That's spirituality, personal growth, nature, all the creative arts, and social change. And social change has been something that's been important to us from the very beginning. And it's in that context that we are delighted and thrilled to have Kim back with us once again. Kim, when did you first come speak at Rowe?
I think in 1983.
Wow. So, and I want to thank the UU funding program run by Hillary and Michelle for making this possible. Welcome, Hillary and Michelle.
Thanks, Arthur. Is that my cue to come on stage?
It is. You're on.
Oh, okay, good. I always blew the entrances. Hi, everybody. I'm Hillary Goodridge. I'm the program director at the UU funding program. I'm really happy to be here with you all and with our grants administrator, Michelle. It's our huge privilege to be able to offer this training. Our funding comes from the UU Beach program at Shelter Rock, specifically also for this particular event. It's also, we also want to give huge gratitude to Arthur, to Arya, to Fia, to Rowe, to Kim for working with us on this. It's awesome. We can bring you all together. I think we have people from 23 different states, 2 Canadian provinces, and the Philippines, which we never could have done if we were doing it still in person. About 55 people are here through the UU funding program, all doing amazing work. The UU funding program is a grant-making organization that's part of the Unitarian Universalist Association. I know some of you signed up for this event in October. Thank you for your promptness. I promise the wait will be worth it. And we offer this training because we want to support our grantees in their efforts to grow, to be self-sustaining, to have a strong and secure funding base for their amazing work. And as we strive to demystify and decolonize institutions that really have not served us, talking about money, asking for money is a critical piece of that. UUs were at and are at the forefront of talking about sex, sexuality, gender, reproductive justice, and it's high time we talk about funds with the same fluidity. Like that alliteration. So think of this as OWL training for money. I first met Kim in a small town in East Texas, and Ronald Reagan was president. We were both 6. I was blown away by her presentation. It totally changed and challenged my thinking about money, about fundraising, about organizing. Kim totally puts the fun back in fundraising and is frankly divine. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Michelle.
You're muted there, Michelle.
Myself. I do that every time. So hello, everyone. I'm Michelle. I'm the UU Funding Program Grants Administrator, and I'm so happy to see you all and to see that so many of you are able to take part in this. Hillary told you about how long ago she met Kim and got training from her. And I had my first training with Kim in the mid-90s when I was a development assistant at GLAD Legal Advocates and Defenders. And I credit what I learned there as being one of the many reasons why we have marriage equality today. among many of GLAD's other important victories. We know that the knowledge and skill that you learn here can do the same for you and for your organizations and projects. And I want to specifically mention challenge grants. Our grants are not meant to be sustaining funds for your organization or your project. So to help you grow and become self-sustaining, we sometimes give challenge grants where we challenge you to find new supporters of your work or get your current supporters to make new contributions or to increase their current contributions. So what you learn here is going to be super important and help you, seek that new support. We also recommend to our grantees that you utilize Faithify. It's the UU funding crowdfunding platform. And happily, one of your fellow trainees is here from Faithify, Halcyon Westall. And by the end of this training, I'm sure that many of you will have had the opportunity to connect with her and with each other. And if not, we will help you do so. So overall, welcome, and I'm so glad and excited that you get to take part in this amazing training with Kim and with our friends from Row.
Thank you, Michelle. So before I introduce Kim, let me introduce you to Fia, my colleague. Fia, why don't you spotlight yourself for a second? Fia is here to help Kim and all of you with the technological parts of what we're doing. She'll also help Kim manage with the questions. And if you need anything from her, you can direct message her using the chat. So again, we are so delighted and thrilled to have Kim back. Kim is a new 8th edition of her classic book, Fundraising for Social Change, co-authored with Stan Yogi, has just come out. Kim has been doing this fundraising for 45 years. She has worked in all aspects of fundraising, as staff, as a volunteer, as a board member, and has helped thousands of grassroots organizations survive through these tough times. She's provided training and consultation in all 50 states and 5 Canadian provinces and 21 other countries. She and her partner, Stephanie, created Klein and Roth in 1993. And I was pleased to read on Kim's on Klein and Roth's website about Kim that her journey began when she was in divinity school, and her field placement took her to one of the first domestic violence shelters in the country, La Casa de la Madre in San Francisco. And she started by asking churches and synagogues to support the shelter, and realized that the taboo in our culture about talking about money made it hard to ask for donations. And as a development director at the Coalition for Medical Rights of Women, she helped them decrease their dependence on foundation funding by building a successful individual donor program. And I thought that detail about having started working with churches would be relevant, since so many of you are coming from church-based organizations. Anyway, welcome, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you. And welcome, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. This is always a fun time to be with Row. And of course, for many years, we were actually at Row, but now we're doing it on Zoom. And I think we wouldn't, there's some disadvantages of Zoom, but one big advantage is we can have people from all over the country. And we even have somebody joining us from Sydney, Australia. So really appreciate it. Want to give a special shout out to those of us like myself who are in California, where we are, since we're not burning up, it's now rainy season, we're kind of floating away. So if you see me kind of gradually leave the screen, that's because my desk has become a little boat. So we'll hope that doesn't happen too much. So we have a lot of people on today, and to make that work for everyone, I really encourage you to use the chat. Fia is going to help me monitor the chat. Hillary and Michelle will help me with it. So be able to get to your question. A lot of you probably know also in the reaction button at the very bottom, it says raise hand. And when you raise your hand, what happens is you move up to the top of the screen, and so I can call on you there, so you don't mind doing that. If all else fails and you just can't quite manage the chat and can't find the raise hand function, just wave madly, and somebody will see you and tell me that you need to talk to me. So one way or another, we can get some questions answered. Arthur gave me a nice introduction. I have, sometimes people will say to me, I just want to say one more thing, and then we'll move into the content for today. People sometimes say to me, how could you possibly have stayed in fundraising so long? And I think there's a kind of a perception among a lot of people that it's either kind of thankless, or it's really scary, or it requires talking to people about money, which nobody wants to do, or whatever. But you know what? For me, and I hope that you will, those of you who haven't yet had this experience, which I think some of you have, I hope all of you will have this experience, to realize that fundraising, and the reason why someone would choose a career in it, is because you're surrounded by generosity. My entire life, I am surrounded by generous people. The kind of people I look for are generous people. The people that I talk to are people who care about things. They want to make the world better. They see problems. We don't always agree on what the solutions are. We don't always agree on the process for solving them, but that's what makes interesting conversations. So I feel I am one of the most fortunate people in the world to have been in this profession for this long, and to have met the people that I've met. And how would I ever meet any of you? So I am super excited to get to know all of you a little bit better during our four sessions together. So I'm just going to start with the screen share. I'll say a couple things. Let's see. I'm not as good at this as I should be, having done it now, for several years through COVID and everything. So one thing I want to say about the PowerPoint is, in addition to the recording, immediately after this session is over, recording will be posted to the Google Doc, which is on the page where you have your password, that email. There is a link to that, and the PowerPoint itself will also be there. And I want to say about the PowerPoint that, I flatter myself slightly, but if you like it, or you like any of the slides, you're welcome to grab them and use them at your own place. It's this is all in the Creative Commons. A lot of this stuff I learned from other people, including Hillary, who I learned a great deal from. And Michelle, I do thank you for giving me so much credit around marriage equality. I think I think there was just so much that went into that, but it's fun to think that I was a tiny little part of it. So this is a little bit more about me. You can see me on the side there, but I just thought I'd let you know some stuff. I love to be outdoors. I hike a lot. I garden a lot. I also have two cats. One is shown here, Mr. Cuddles, and you can see why he's named that. He's very, very cuddly. He was feral. He was completely a scratching, clawing, hissing machine when I first got him when he was 8 weeks old. And then he just turned into such a sweetheart. And then on the left there, the other person I'm with is my wife, Stephanie Roth, who's also my partner in business. And so we have a lot of fun. This is a little bit of me, the kind of me you won't see during this presentation, but that I am in the rest of my life. I want to give you all a chance to introduce yourselves. Now we don't, and if we were all together, we would go around, and we certainly do not have the time to do that today, but I do want to kind of create a little, as much as we can, a little mini community amongst the 60 or 70 of us that are here. And so we'll just do that in groups of 2 and 3 and 4 at a time. So I asked Fia if you could please get people into groups of 4 and just tell each other, the usual stuff that we say, what our organization is, what your role is in it. And most especially, what do you love about fundraising? Now, I know some of you may think nothing. That's okay. You can say nothing. We won't die from that. What do you love about fundraising? So we'll just take a few minutes and you'll at least know those 3 other people on your screen. Sophia, if you can do that, that'd be great. Are people invited now? Okay.
Yes, they are.
I don't know if you can hear that. We're having a really intense thunderstorm. There's like all this thunder in the background. Stop the
All right.
sharing just for a
I won't
minute.
say any words.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Just wait till everyone gets in. This is one thing I love, you know, for those of you who do training and teaching, there's a lot of discussion about the benefits and not of Zoom. One of the things I love about it is in a real in-person training, you say, come back, and you have to keep shouting, come back, okay, come back, and then nobody does. But this is like, you're just back, like you're forced back. So there's some big advantages of that, I'll tell you. So I just thought we just take a minute or two, and maybe you can use the raise hand function to tell me what is the thing that you love about fundraising. Let's just get a couple ideas going from that. Even one idea would be great. What do you love about? Oh, okay, great. And I'm going to probably say your name wrong. Cyril Burt.
Yep, Sir LeBear. So yeah.
Cyril LeBear. Sorry about that.
I was saying in the group, even though I've been fairly successful at it, I mostly love when the campaign is over. So one of my goals for the class is to hopefully learn to feel better about all of it.
Yeah, well, I think that's fine. I think honestly, people can raise their hand if they want. What a lot of people love is counting the money. Yeah, you know, that's like one of the sad things. I mean, there's so many great things about giving online and stuff like that. But one of the sad things about the fact that we're moving increasingly away from checks is it used to be fun. And some of you were older, remember when you go to the mailbox and you'd pull out this pile of checks and you just, and it would be the most fun thing. So I think that's fine to love when the campaign is over. Let's have one other idea. One other thought. What do you love about, okay, Shannon.
I like the moment when you can connect what a donor is really interested in and what they want to do with a mission-driven item that you have. When you can make that connection and they can say, they have that aha moment, yes, if I do this, then this will happen. That's very gratifying.
I agree. And that's the gift of fundraising. The people will, I'll probably say this 100 times, people are going to give away their money. People who give away money are going to give it away. And what they're looking for is a place to give it where it really is going to do good work. And so Shannon is exactly right about that. We have some things in the chat, helping donors realize their values. Totally agree with that. You know, getting to your target amount, like knowing, like having some relief, you don't have to worry. The storytelling, absolutely. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed mission. People said I love talking about mission. That's great. I hope you enjoyed talking with each other. I'm going to move along just because we have actually a lot to cover today and want to make sure that we get to it. So I'm going to go back here. And just a brief overview of the course. Today, we're going to talk about what is required for successful fundraising. This is a little bit more background and what you need to have in place. And I'm going to ask you to think about your own organization with regard to this. Next week, we will talk about choosing the right fundraising strategies, and we are going to go in depth into digital and online fundraising with a colleague of mine named Haley Bash, who is actually runs a thing called Donor Hub and does a lot of work for candidates. But I think the stuff she will have to tell you about online will be very good. And I'll come back to this at the end, but what I'd like you to do is think about what questions you might have for her, and really invite also Halcyon from Faithify to really leap in on that one. The third session is looking at prospect identification, doing more personal solicitation and asking for money in person. And again, a colleague of mine named Wanda Scott is going to be talking to us a fair amount about that. She's done a lot of individual donor, major donor fundraising. And the fourth one, we'll put it all together in a plan and take it back to our organizations and be transformed forever. or not, anyway, something like that. Few group agreements I like to have. We're going to start on time. By on time, I mean 2 or 3 minutes late to give people time to be here. If you're a person who talks a lot like me, I'd ask you to kind of hold back a little bit. If you're a person who doesn't talk very much and kind of hold back, please put yourself forward more. That again can be in the chat or live by raising your hand. That's up to you. I really think the only truly stupid questions are the ones you don't ask. You don't have to ask me. You can ask people in your breakout rooms. You can email people afterwards. You are also more than welcome. I really welcome people emailing me between sessions. So, and I'll give you my email at the end. These others are kind of pretty obvious. I know that sometimes people have to keep their video off for bandwidth or whatever else is going on in their house, but if you can keep it on, it's great. And we will unmute you when it's time to speak. So these are my group agreements. I find they work pretty well. If you have others, you can type them into the chat, or if something comes up as we go along that you would like to suggest be a group agreement, please feel free. So I want to kind of start with setting the context for fundraising, and I'm going to run through this because I don't think anything about it will be particularly new to people. But I think it's useful. Fundraisers, I find, we are very hard on ourselves, and we're always thinking if we only had done this or sent it a day earlier, called more times, or done this or that, the thing would have been better. And sometimes we don't take into account that we live, and this is a very difficult time to raise money. I have lived through many, many eras, recessions, depressions, invasions, wars, and I would say this is one of the most difficult times, and it's because actually a lot of things are happening at once. The pandemic certainly has turned things around, sometimes in an interesting way, but climate change, the way that in a way Donald Trump tore down the thin tattered veil that allowed us to think that maybe things weren't as bad as we thought. We see that things are, pretty bad, particularly around race and racism. So there's a lot of background noise, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of concern for people. I'm not going to focus on all of that. That's something that you all probably talk about a lot. I would have nothing new to say. I do want to just look at the three things, though, so a little bit about the changing demographics of our country, the impact of rising wealth inequality. And the one that I think is probably the most important starting the last couple of years has been the fact that people are no longer using nonprofits as the way that they express their charity. And this actually has some pretty serious implications. So let's just look at these. Again, if you want to make a comment, share your experience, disagree with me or whatever, please type into the chat, and Fia will let me know if you do that. Wait, here we go. Wait 1 second. So we have two big demographic shifts happening in the United States, major, monumental, never before seen in history. And one is racial and one is generational. This is kind of looking at race, that white people are basically becoming the minority population over time. We are here in California, of course, we are already the minority. The majority of people in California are people of color. The majority of people in California are also under 45, so this is a young state. And this kind of just shows how that's going to change. Now, this also has a lot of implications, and depending on where you are, each of you is in a different place. And also I know in Canada, you have different demographic changes happening. Some of this is driven by immigration. But depending on where you are will dictate how you want to respond to it. But the fact is that the style of nonprofits, where we have a sort of older white board, an older white, mostly female workforce, and a sort of slightly older, mostly white donor base, is over. It has to be over. If you are that, you will not be alive in a few years. I mean, there's just no way. You need to move to look like your community. And that's going to require some cultural shifts. In some places, it will require even kind of thinking about languages. How many languages do you put your materials out into? What are the cultural issues around raising money in different kinds of communities. So this is all stuff that we all have to be paying attention to. It's actually pretty exciting. And when you see people pay attention to it in a way that when they're excited about it and they kind of think this is like a brand new thing and this is a way to invite people into our organizations who haven't historically felt invited into them, and they embrace that, I think it can be really fun. But it's a big, big change. The other really big change is the generational change. And this one I want to call your attention to because it has a number of implications. So I, being a baby boomer, have lived through all these generations. My parents were the silent generation, so I knew them. All of my colleagues, then of course Gen X, millennials, and now of course Gen Alpha, which isn't, they're not entirely all here yet. They are born entirely in this century. But look at this thing, baby boomers. The reason I put used to be 78 million, because obviously the silent generation used to be much bigger too, but we've so many of us have died from, I sometimes say, from exhaustion from fundraising. But the reason why I put in how many of us there were at the height of our generation, baby boomers, is because when you look at Gen X, you see how tiny that generation was. Many boomers did not have children. And we weren't at that time quite, the millennials is driven partly by Gen X having children, but also by immigration, as is the iGen or Gen Z. So what is happening right now in all walks of life in the United States and in Canada is we have this very large aging generation of boomers. Then we have this tiny little Gen X. Well, we could go back to the screen. I could ask how many of you are Gen X, but if you're a Gen X, I'll tell you something. I feel badly for you. I feel sorry for you because you are so squashed between these two giant generations. And people are not, I think, are not very respectful always of Gen X. So you have this big boomer generation, then this little tiny generation, then millennials are big, and then of course iGen is really big. So what it means though is as baby boomers age out and retire, we don't have right behind us enough people to take our place, either as donors or as staff or as board members. So we don't have quite the experience. Now, the exciting thing about this for millennials is you bring people in who are, who maybe don't have the experience you want, but have the energy, are willing to learn, grew up a little bit more technological natives, as we say. So there's a lot of, there are advantages and disadvantages, but you kind of look at that and think, one thing that's going to have to happen in terms of donors is most of you are going to have to really focus on legacy gifts. And we will talk about legacy in the, I believe in the third session, getting more legacy gifts in order to tide you over until millennials are old enough to start taking their place as really the more major donors or more steady donors. And millennials have had a hard time. The workforce has not been great. It's been very up and down. We're about to maybe go into another recession. So these are very big changes, and they have a lot of implications for fundraising. The third one is, of course, the change in wealth since 2008. And some of you are probably thinking, well, the top right-hand, top 1%, that little green line going up has come down a little bit, but it's come down only a little bit. Everyone is like having a fit. The stock market, oh, blah, blah, blah. The stock market is back down to where it was in like 2021. I mean, really, just get a grip. You're still, if you're still in the top 1%, so don't worry about it. And the bottom 50% are even more at the bottom. So we have this rising gap between rich and poor. And this has affected fundraising in a number of ways. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with Mackenzie Scott, who's, I think has done amazing stuff. She kind of gives these extremely large amounts of money to random groups, and a lot of them very progressive and no strings attached. And of course, the problem with this is, and the same with sort of, we call it the Oprah Winfrey effect, is that then everyone wants that. That's what they want. And they don't want to do the hard work of getting $25 and $50 donors and $100 donors. But having one donor give you a lot of money is nice. I wish that for all of you. But having many donors giving you all different varieties of money, I wish that more for you. It will make you more stable. It will make you more steady. You won't drown in money. And the tendency, there's a lot of evidence now that there's an overemphasis on major gifts. And this has resulted in the next thing, which is, wait a minute, which is that fewer and fewer people are giving away money. Used to be when I was first in fundraising, about 75% of Americans, of people living in the United States, whether they were born here or came here from somewhere else, 75% gave away money. In Canada was around 80%. Now, and then for many, many years, it went down to about 65, 67%, and now it's somewhere down around 60%. So we're losing donors. We're losing donors. And one of the reasons people think we're losing donors is because smaller gifts are not appreciated. So if somebody is working, say, at minimum wage, and their take-home pay for a day might be $50, and they could give that away, but if they never ever see any publicity from your organization, or they never see anywhere on social media that $50 or $25 is a good size gift, they will not give it. And if all they see is $1 million, 50 million, 100 million, they feel completely shut out of the process. So this is, I think, partly why we're losing donors. The other reason we're losing, well, one thing I wanted to talk about here is the trends as they relate to fundraising. We'll come to something else about why we're also losing donors. So this is the revenue of all nonprofits. And some of you may have seen today, actually just dropped the new report from the independent sector about the health of the nonprofit sector. It said that this last year, $1.5 trillion went through the nonprofit sector. We now, in the nonprofit sector, which is 1.7 million nonprofits, is the third largest employer in the United States. I mean, we are an enormous, powerful economic driver. This is where our money is from, earned income. This will, of course, mostly be hospitals, goodwill, tuition is the vast, vast majority of that. Government, this is mostly direct service agencies, home people, working with people without homes, people feeding people, clinics and things like that. Philanthropy, we are entirely focused today on philanthropy, and I'll show you in a minute what that means. That's individual donors, foundations, and corporations. And then investment income is all these endowments that some of the very large institutions have. The money that comes off of that is separated out as a separate category now. This is philanthropic giving. This is the 13%. This is from Giving USA. You can see that it's a lot of money. Almost $485 billion last year. No, well, 2021. We don't have the numbers for 2022 yet. And as you can see, what is true, and this has been true, I want to tell you something, that this information I'm giving to you now, when I first learned it in 1977 or 8, it completely changed my life. I was working as, Arthur said, I was working in this domestic violence program, La Casa de las Madres. I was trying to write, I was supposed to raise money from churches, and I did, but then I also had in my mind that probably most money came from foundations. So I was writing endless proposals. Some of you are old enough to remember that when, you'd go to the Foundation Center, which was an actual physical library, and they had these big, giant blue books. And somebody gave me an old one. They got an old one from the Foundation Center out of the trash. And so I had this old, old information. I would read through it and write, letters of inquiry and send them off. And practically by return mail, I would get a rejection letter. Oh, we really hope, we wish you well, but we can't fund you. And, after about, I don't know, enough letters that I could paper my apartment with them of rejection letters, I thought, this cannot be how Stanford raises money. I mean, this just cannot be how the opera raises money. So I've always believed you can find all information at the library. So I went to the library and I found this book, Giving USA, which has been being published since right after World War II. And in it was a diagram very similar to this. I mean, the total amount of money was, I think, I don't know, 35 billion or something. But it was basically that most money came from people. You had 67% coming from living people, 9% coming from bequests. That's people making arrangements for you in their will. And then on their death, the charity realizes the money. So living and dead, you can see that dead people give away more than twice as much as corporations. That kind of tells you how important they are. And 19% coming from foundations. And of course, many of the individuals who give away money create foundations. So most of the foundation money actually itself comes from individuals. So this is, I thought to myself, why would I keep writing to foundations. Why would I try to get money from corporations when the money is so clearly in the world of people? And so that changed my life, and I have been in the world of people ever since and never looked back. I mean, that's just where the money, that's just where money lives. So this is the final thing that I want to kind of keep that in mind and then go to this. When I mentioned this earlier, that the number of people giving away money is going down. And in fact, during COVID, it really went down pretty significantly, I think, because a lot of people had lost their jobs. We're now back up at about 56%, between 56 and 60%, depending on which study you look at. This lending tree is pretty reliable. But this is people giving to nonprofits. And what I think is also happening, and I'd be curious if any of you are seeing this at all, is people are bypassing nonprofits. So that we have a situation in which, like GoFundMe, where instead of waiting for a nonprofit to kind of step up and help people, people just band together and they raise money for their friend or their family or their situation. And just an example of that is that GoFundMe, which is just one platform, GoFundMe the GoFundMe platform raised for a variety of people $80 million just for gas, grocery, or baby formula. Those were the three things. This example I have here in the slide is a house fire. That's not included in that. So people are being very charitable. I personally don't believe, and there are other studies that back me up on this, I do not believe that fewer people are giving. I think the same number of people, 70% or so of the American population, and probably the Canadian population as well, is still giving away money, but they are not necessarily giving through nonprofits. And it's because they want to see exactly where their money goes. So this is an interesting little trend. So that's just a little background. I went through it pretty fast, but I think it's an important thing to kind of place ourselves in a context. So having said kind of some depressing things, I want to say some things that are going to always be true. That, or at least they always have been true. I don't know why they would change. One is that givers are going to give. I said this earlier, people give away money. The 55%, the 60%, the 70% of the population gives away money is going to give it away. Remember this, more people give away money than vote in almost every election. More people give away money than volunteer. More people give away money than attend any house of worship. In fact, from one end of the United States and Canada, from one end of our country to the other, both of our countries, if you were to say, what do we have in common? What do we have in common? I would say the one thing that we have in common is that the vast majority of us give away money. And that's an amazing thing. And so your job is actually just sort of like a shower. If you're going to get clean in the shower, you aim the little shower head at your body. You don't aim it away. So you get in front of the person who's going to give, and you say, well, as long as you're giving away the money, how about my group? And they say, tell me more about your group, or no, not your group, or maybe your group. They say what they want, but your job is simply to put that invitation there. And you do it by remembering that, as Kay Grace says, people give to organizations that meet needs. A lot of us have just come off this year-end December fundraising. I could not believe the number of organizations that wrote to me, we have a match. We have to meet this amount. You have to give by midnight. You have to just no, none of that is true. First of all, it doesn't have anything to do with me. When you say you need money, it just reminds me that I need money. There's nothing exciting about that. And every group was kind of the same. I was like, geez, people, could you be a little more original? So what are you going to do with the money? That's what people want to know. People give to organizations that appreciate them, that send thank you notes, and that show that their gift, whatever the size of the gift, is useful. Most donors give to between 10 and 15 organizations. Some give to a lot more, and of course, some give to less, but this is kind of the average amount, and they add and subtract a few organizations every year. What you want to be, of course, is in the group that gets added and never gets subtracted. And we'll talk about how you can do that. Donors will, the other thing that I think a lot of people miss out on in fundraising is the thing you want to focus on is the lifetime value of the donor. So somebody comes into your organization at $20, that's great. You know, first of all, hopefully you can use $20 and that's a good thing, but you don't make a lot of money on a $20 gift. By the time you thank the person and enter them in the database and send them stuff, it's really true. You don't make a lot of money on a $20 gift, but that's not the point. The point is that next year they may give 25 or 50. They may become a monthly donor. They may over time give several $1,000s. They may die and leave you their entire estate. And so everything is about getting the donor and then trying to get them to give over and over and building that relationship. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. There are three things that I think people really must keep in mind. Donors are not motivated by tax incentives. There is endless evidence that this is the case. Obviously, a tax incentive can make a gift more attractive, but the donor still has to decide to make the gift. So, and for the vast majority of donors, since 85% of people file a short form and don't itemize, they receive no tax benefit for their giving. This is partly why donors are bypassing nonprofits, because there is no advantage to them to going through a nonprofit from a point of view of their taxes. Donors do not like to be treated like an ATM. In other words, they don't like it when the only time they hear from you is when you want more money. And again, to kind of underline, they feel they need to know that their money was well used. So that's a little background to kind of look at. What I want to do next is look through the 4 things you need to have in place to really do appropriate fundraising. But before we do that, I'm just going to give you a chance to go into a breakout room and kind of think about what's most striking or surprising to you. And of course, none of this, for many of you, none of this will be surprising, so that's fine. What trends are having the biggest impact on your organization you want to take into account? And does any of this information change how you're thinking about your fundraising? Just share with each other for a few minutes, and we'll come back. And also, if you want to take a little, if you need to get up and get a glass of water, that's fine too. We'll have about 7 minutes for this exercise. Sophia, I'll wait for you to put people into rooms.
Ready to go. Everybody's
Okay, everybody's coming back.
they'll be here in about half a minute.
Hi, Kim. I just want to say hi. I'm Mary Vaney. I've been in at least a couple of your trainings before. I don't know if you remember me, probably not. You have see hundreds of people, but I feel like I'm a Kim groupie so, at this point. So I come to your training for the latest and to get energized for, what is coming next.
Oh, good. Well, I hope I give you some of the late. I do remember you actually, now that you say that, Mary. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Hello. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. Okay, I think everybody's back now. So I wondered if anybody wanted to share something that they thought they learned, or, maybe you already knew it before, but sometimes you know something and you hear it again, you're like, oh, I really got to do something about that. So anything that we've talked about so far that you think, oh yeah, this might change a little bit how we're thinking about our fundraising, or it already has, and we already are trying to move in this direction because of kind of paying attention to some of these trends and some of these issues. And of course, wide open to any questions. Somebody had typed into the chat about mutual aid. That's another example of where I think donors are bypassing nonprofits and going straight to kind of mutual aid societies. So anyone have anything they want to share from their group that they either is your own idea or in your group? I'm just looking at the chat. The great importance, yes, thank you, Kathy. The great importance of valuing small donations, quote unquote, and directing the giving to specific things. Yeah, insofar as you can describe where the money goes, that helps people. They like to kind of have that general sense. But I think really emphasizing, I see a lot of times in really well-meaning groups. I mean, I feel like all the groups I give to are really good, very, very progressive, very out there. But one thing I think that a mistake that they make is they say no gift is too small. You don't need to remind people of that. You don't need to say that. Why make them feel small about their small gift? It's like, why not say no gift is too big? That's actually way more inclusive. Yeah, every gift is useful. Every gift above 0 is that much less for you to have to raise. So any other thoughts? Oh, Kate, you have your hand up. Yeah, very good.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm with the UU Young Adult Revival Network, YARN, and um, the thing you said about bypassing nonprofits struck me because like YARN is still underneath like a church. We're not like our own nonprofit yet, and we'll probably go that route because there's a lot of benefits, but also realizing that like there are other possibilities, and thinking about, you know, what would work best for us.
Yeah. Well, these are, yeah, and I don't have any advice for you on that, Kate, but it is an interesting question to ponder. What structure would be the best? What works the best for you? I think people, though, I think in your case, people will go directly to you. There's not a way to bypass what you're doing, right? Whereas, for example, at a direct service organization, say an organization that provides, material aid to someone, but you have to apply. I can think of an example myself, a friend of mine who is has lost a job, is really having a very hard time, and now has to have a bunch of teeth out and replaced. And he goes to this program that does free dental work, but it's like 4 months. There's this huge backlog of people, and it's 4 months. Well, he doesn't have 4 months. So then I was actually a person who put together a GoFundMe for him to get the $4,000 that he needs to get. So I bypassed that nonprofit. So that's kind of what we're looking at there, where people think it's faster, it's easier, it's more direct. I know exactly where the money's going. So, but good luck with that situation. Amina, am I saying your name right?
You are, thank you.
Oh, good, okay.
I'm interested in this concept of kind of humanizing the giving, right? So I know where my money is going. It's going directly to this idea, this program that I want to support. But in order for these programs to operate, there's actually operation costs within a nonprofit. And I always hear, no, we don't ask for operation costs. It's not really, people aren't going to be attuned to giving to that. In your opinion, is that an area to educate? Is that just an area you stay away from? I mean, that is that human component, right? Living costs are raising, salaries don't match living costs. This is that human GoFundMe component to an organization that provides the services that I'm curious what your take on that is.
Well, this is actually a little, I'm really happy you asked this question. And actually someone else has put in the chat, people don't necessarily, they want to give to a project, not to operating support. This is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. If I were to be able to conjure up all the leadership of the United Way from the 1980s, because I feel like they kind of taught people this concept of operating costs or administrative costs. Mr. and Mrs. Front Porch Donor never used to think like that, right? They didn't even think, is this an operating cost? They would just think it costs money to do your work. Like it just costs money, right? And there became this separation. I think foundations have been very guilty of it, that they don't fund general operating. Well, that is, to me, the most absurd thing. Like, first of all, when you think of certain kinds of costs, like an audit, what kind of a cost is an audit? It's an operating cost. Yeah, what kind of cost is a bookkeeper? It's an operating cost. You really honestly don't want to have a bookkeeper? You don't want to balance your books? I remember when Ted Turner many years ago, and he said he was giving $1 billion to the United Nations, to the maybe to UNICEF, I think, and not one penny of it was going to go into operating. And I was like, Ted, no one can even walk down the street to the bank with your check. It's like, we need some operating costs to be able to deposit this thing. And it's the most kind of absurd, stupid division. And it reminds me, actually, we have someone here from Montreal, so they'll appreciate this. I used to live in Montreal, and I tried to learn French. And I learned enough French to be able to ask a question, like, where's the train station? But I could not understand the answer. So really the only French I needed to know was, do you speak English? Because that was the only thing that was really helpful. Well, this is the same with donors, right? How much of this is going to operating costs? They have no idea what to listen for. Is it 50%? Is it 10%? I'll tell you something, if a group says 0, none of your money, meaning none of your money is going to operating, that's because 100% of someone else's is going to operate. That's the only way that can possibly work. So I think we do have, as a society, as a sector, an obligation to educate people that it costs money to stay in business. You have to have computers. It costs actually way more money now than it used to because of all the database costs and all the cost of stuff, the phones and all this kind of stuff. That didn't used to be quite such an issue with the website. And there is a way to make that, I think, kind of exciting. There was a group in Washington, D.C., it's still there, called, cripes, his name is the Quixote Center. And they did a lot of Central America solidarity work, a lot of trying to get women ordained to priesthood. They were really kind of a pretty wide variety group. And they did a lot of fundraising appeals every year. And one appeal they did was written, so they were this very left-wing group, right? So they would write the one appeal, they did like 12 appeals a year, but one appeal a year would be written from as if their computer had written it. And the computer had a personality of this very curmudgeonly, unfriendly, introverted Republican. And so, all right, these people, honest to God, they want me to work day and night, but they stand up for unions and they want to use recycled paper in the printer, but it gets caught, but no, they can't think of anything else. And it would be these kind of complaints, and I'm supposed to function without being upgraded, and because they can't afford it. And it was really, and you know what, really amazing thing? That appeal got more money than any of the others. And the computer had a name, I've forgotten his name. But one year they got a new person into the Quixote Center, and she said, "Oh no, this is very unprofessional. No, we're not going to do that." And people actually wrote and called and asked, "What happened?" I don't know. Let's say his name was Peter. What happened to Peter? I was sort of like, Peter was not actually a real. He was actually, but so educating people, I think, about that is really, really important. And even what your administrators do in order to be mission fulfilling. Yeah, so people have a couple of things. This is a consequence of the Teresa Heinz philanthropic investment movement. That's cute. That's very funny. People do want to see, I agree, Kenya has written, people want to see incredible work in the community. And in order to see that, they have to understand what makes that possible. So we do have an obligation to, but I think if you never say the word, administrative costs, they will, generally speaking, donors will not raise it. It's not in there. It's in your vocabulary from dealing with funders and from dealing with your accountant. It's not in their vocabulary. I'm just looking at the chat here. Yeah, focus on the needs we provide through the service and program. And that's right. And who meets these needs, these service needs, as a paid staff person sometimes. So that becomes part of your costs. Anything else that came up in your small groups? Do you want to say any other questions or comments? That was a very rich. Okay, well then let's go back. Let's look at how we're going to get our hands on all this money, our share of the 485 billion. All right, so there's a frame that all fundraising happens inside of, and you kind of imagine one side of it. Yeah, I'm going to take you through each of these, but just to give you a sense of the frame, that the purpose of fundraising is not to raise money. The purpose of fundraising is to build relationships. It's to find donors. In other words, not donations. A giver is more important than the gift. And that's why, for example, when someone gives you money one year and the next year they lose their job and they don't give you money, they are still a donor. Okay, they're still a donor. The intent would be to give if they had the money. The second side of the frame is that you have to have something to use the money for. You need to have a compelling case. And I think a lot of people most organizations have a compelling case, but they really are not very good at putting it forward. The third side of the frame says we use a wide range of strategies. We raise money in a wide variety of ways. And of course, this becomes, and you'll hear from Haley next week, this becomes more and more important that you're completely flexible with your donors. You have an enormous number of ways in which they can give money. And the fourth is you distribute the fundraising task very widely. Every single person in your organization, regardless of their job, whether volunteer or paid, needs to know what their job is with regard to fundraising. Fundraising is not one person's job or one committee's job. It is very wide ranging, and generally, not always, but generally it does start with the board of directors. So that's the frame we're working in. I want to take you through each part of it now, and kind of as we're going through it to think, where are you strong and where are you weak? And I'll tell you something, there are very few organizations that could say we are strong on all four sides of the frame. You have some weaknesses. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, right? If you have weaknesses, you just know where you need to put in some time. So the first side of the frame says the purpose of fundraising is to build relationships, build authentic relationships. And to do that, we invite people to give. That's the hardest thing, to get a person to go from 0 to 1. We invite people to make a gift. Having invited them to make a gift, what's the first thing we do when we get the gift? We thank the donor. In the old days of checks, we used to say, thank before you bank. Now the thank you is kind of automatically generated from your online thing, if you're not, for the donors that use that, but they are thanked. You have and you have strategies that are specifically designed to invite people into the organization. Once they're in, you thank them. And the entire purpose of getting one gift is to get a second gift. There is no other reason to get one gift except to get a second gift. And it's from the second gift on that you begin to make money from the donor. So you could spend more money getting that first gift than the donor gave. That's fine. That doesn't matter, because the point was to get them in the door. So we get them to give over and over. We do that with information, with newsletters, with personalized mail, with inviting them to be part of the community. Because remember, part of the point, and this is something I should have said earlier, part of the point of having a broad base of donors is to have a broad base of power. You now have people that will, in addition to donating, they will write letters to their senators. They will show up at meetings. They will attend the city council. They will come to demonstrations. They will share with you their own experience about what you're doing so that you can sharpen and focus your programs. So donors provide a lot of things. They're not simply a source of money. And I think organizations get in trouble. I've had many people say, oh, it's much more efficient to have one donor or earned income, for example, much more efficient. The donors are all taking up a lot of time. But those are people that don't understand the point of the donors is to build the power that we need in terms of community organizing to make the changes that we need to make. And so if you have no desire to build power, you have no desire to address the systemic root cause of a problem, you have no desire to really fundamentally shift the way things work and make them really more equitable, then yeah, building a base of donors probably won't be the thing you want to do. But I think for most people that I have ever worked with and are attracted to the Row trainings, we actually want to make a difference. And that means we build power with our donors. And the more donors we have, the more power we have. Not the more major donors and the more donors of any kind. This is sort of like voting. If the more people who vote for you, the more likely you are to win. This is the same concept. So the second gift comes in. What's the point of getting a second gift? Is partly to reward the person, to start bringing them in, and to invite them to make more gifts and bigger gifts. And you cannot tell when a person gives, whatever the person gives the first time, that will have virtually no relationship to what they will ultimately give. In fact, I have known very wealthy people who deliberately send $25, $35, $50 as their first gift to the organization because they want to see how the organization treats their smaller donors. They want to see, do they get a decent thank you note? Do they get put on? And it's just a test. And you have no idea who these people are. Similarly, someone could send you $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, and that's because they just inherited it, or they won it, or they had to do an IRA minimum required minimum distribution or something, but they don't have that year after year, right? So you're like, oh, that's a major donor and this other person is not. You don't have any idea. You also never know how much $50 is to a person. And for me, the thing about a major gift, we do have to have a definition of it. You know, we do need to say it's this much money, but to keep in mind, really philosophically, a major gift is what is a large gift to that person. This is a large gift to me. Okay. And $1 million, I'm sorry, to Jeff Bezos, $1 million is not a major gift. It's just nothing. Right. And to someone else who is living on unemployment or Social Security, whatever, $50 is a major gift. So I try to keep that in mind always, and to really make sure that I appreciate all the gifts. Ultimately, we invite people to give over and over. We invite them to come closer. We invite them to volunteer. We invite them to be on the board. We invite them to do other things. So we are working with a whole person, again, not an ATM. And, and at some point we invite them also to think about making us the beneficiary of their will through a legacy gift. And that of course is the ultimate gift. That's where a person gives you money and they have no idea what you did with it, and they have no recourse because where they've gone, they don't see it anymore. So this is kind of the frame you're working in organizations. What you want, those of you who are staff, I'm now talking to you, those of you who are staff, you want to always measure what percent of response did you get for any effort to get a first time gift. So an online appeal or a direct mail appeal, what percent of response did you get? Any effort to get a person to get a second gift, we call that a conversion rate. We'll talk a little bit more about this another time, but what the number of people that made one gift that make a second gift, that's called your conversion rate. You want to know what that is to see if you're having a proper conversion rate. It's not very high. It's generally about 20%. Only about 20% of people who give you one gift will ever give you a second gift. It's that group of people, that 20% you really work hard with. Then of those people, about 75 or 80% of them will give you a third, a fourth, or fifth gift, and so on. So you want to keep track of that. And you use different strategies to invite people in for the first time than to keep them. I mean, I have a group I've been giving to for 40 years. I was at their founding meeting, and I love this group, but their fundraising department sucks. I mean, it's just unbelievably, they're so bad. And I'll tell you one example of that is they write every year, and they write, we were founded in whatever, 1978 or something. And I think I know, I was there, and then they tell me like what they do and what they believe in. Like, I didn't know that. Like, I have not been giving every single year. I should be segmented into a whole different group of people. So the brand new donors get one set of information and the longtime donors get another one. You don't just fire hose everybody with the same information. Second thing, the second side of the frame is the notion that you need to build a case for support. Why do you exist? What do you do about why you exist? How do you do it? How much does it cost? Where do you get your money? And of course, that last thing, where do you get your money? Well, from people like you, actually. So that's very nice. Now, what happens when we talk about our organization way too often is that we start, and this is something I learned very early on from a mentor of mine. He said, when people ask you, what does your group do? Don't answer that question. Answer the question, why do you exist? Because the why goes to the heart. People buy with their heart first and then their head. You think of a very simple-minded example, American Lung Association. When you can't breathe, nothing else matters. See, that's kind of it doesn't say anything about what they do, but it kind of, you're like, oh, that's right. Okay, what do you do about that? Well, we have these programs, that program, we do smoking cessation, and we, provide this or that. So, but if you started with that, it's bouncing off my head, okay? You have that sort of, famous, the more famous ones like a mind is a terrible thing to waste. That's kind of a famous one. Or one I love very much is it's much easier to build a child than to repair an adult. That's a kind of a nice, those heart things. What do we do? And to say, why do you exist is sort of, what do you most believe? What do you most believe? Start with that and then go on with the other stuff. This is your case. Everybody should have a copy of it. You work with it. And most of the successful organizations I've been in, the chair of the board starts the meeting with a recitation of the mission. Okay, welcome everybody. Glad you're here for our meeting. Why are we here? And because it's the third Thursday. No. Oh, because we believe the Bill of Rights cannot defend itself. That, of course, is the American Civil Liberties Union. And you start with that. You start, oh yeah, that's right. That's why I'm here. And you get everybody revved up. So you kind of are always leading with that. That's the second frame. I want to give you a chance to think about this for yourself. Some of you have very excellent mission statements or slogans or things that you could lead with. And some of you actually don't. Yours are kind of, they're too wordy, they're too long. You don't even remember it. You know, I've many times when we're in person, I always say, now tell me what your mission statement is. And people grab their phone and they're like, wait, I'm looking it up. It's like, if you have to look it up, it's not effective. You know, you need to know it. So we're going to go into a little brief exercise now, just with two people. You'll just be with one other person, hopefully not from your group. And I want you to finish this sentence for them. We believe. We believe what? Or you could also say because something or other. And stop and then see if your partner is inspired to want to know more about your group. Because the idea is you say something and the person actually kind of leans forward and says, oh, tell me more. I'd like to know more. And this is kind of metaphorically also what they do when they go to your website. They're, okay, I want to go to the next page. I want to click on this icon. So you can kind of imagine that. We'll just take about 5 minutes for this in breakouts of 2. And then if you want to take a break right after that, we'll just take an extra 2 or 3 minutes for you to have, take a quick break. Okay, so we'll come back all together in about 10 minutes.
If you find yourself in a room alone, I'll find you and put you in a room with somebody.
Thanks, Fia. I think we're all back, Fia. Great. Okay, so just to address a couple of questions that came up in the chat. Are small trinkets and gifts still a thing that works? Stamp calendars, stickers. You know, I'm not a big fan of those things. But they can, if you have something that actually really makes sense for your group, that or that actually helps build the power and visibility of your group. Like, for example, there's an organization that I have worked with off and on over the years in a little bitty town that I used to live in. And they have a sticker, and a lot of people in the town have the sticker on their car. And it actually gives the impression, I mean, the correct impression, but also it kind of reinforces the impression that this is a powerful group, and a lot of people have the sticker on their car. So I like that. I think that's a good thing, and it builds visibility. So I like that kind of stuff. I know in other groups they'll have a board member or staff person who might have written a book. They'll give copies of that book to cross section of their donors. I think that works. So when it's something that really it feels, you know, organic to your group, it's fine. But I wouldn't do that. Normally, I think what you really want to train people to do is that the work is the reward. The work is the reward. And so, and the thank you tells them about the work. Yeah, a couple people said, just to kind of know that if somebody leaves you suddenly, it's not because they don't like you, because probably something's happened to their technology. And that goes for me too. If I leave you suddenly, that'll be because we have suddenly lost power. All right, so I would really like it if 2 or 3 people would be willing to share either their own mission statement, starting we believe or because or whatever, or the mission statement of the person that they were with. Just like, and these don't have to be perfect. They just have to be kind of interesting and to give us some idea. So who might be willing to do that? And you might even get a small trinket if you do it. Or you might not. All right, Randy, bless your heart. Go ahead.
This is not maybe very innovative, but when I started my organization 20 years ago, we had to come up with a mission. And so we just started out with the first UU principle, which was respecting the worth and dignity of every human being. And it then became, it was more than a personal story. It was kind of like, how do we think about social justice? That we talk about the worth and dignity of other people who have had their dignity eroded or attacked. So it works for me, I guess I'll put it that way.
Oh, I think that one really works. Respecting the worth and dignity of every human being. Yes, it absolutely kind of appeals to the best part of us. It grabs hold of your heart. Thank you. That's a really good one. Sarah Ruth.
My conversation partner, I believe the
This mission statement was, we believe in people first roads, and this is for a nonprofit that is promoting safe cycling. And I thought
Okay.
that that was just really great.
Oh, that's very clever play on words. We believe in people first roads. And you're kind of like,
Yes.
what does that mean? And then we go, it's about cycle. Oh yeah, I totally get it. I like that. Thank you. That's excellent. Jess.
So this is for my very new organization, it's under a year old. We are rebuilding the mental health crisis system from the ground up.
Okay, say it again, please.
We are rebuilding the mental health crisis system from the ground up.
Oh, we're rebuilding the mental health crisis system from the ground up. Okay, that's an example. I like that one a lot. And that's slightly different from what we've had. That's an example of what we call the big claim. The big claim, like the big vision. And people will very drawn to that. It's a certain style of mission statement. I like it. I like it. Very good, Jess. Thank you for sharing. Elizabeth.
Well, I met a very compelling lady in the chat who introduced herself by saying, my name is Fran, and I believe everybody deserves a bed to sleep on. It caught my attention, and I immediately thought I agree with that. Tell me more.
Yeah.
So I wanted to share that.
That's good. I believe everybody deserves a bed to sleep on. Yeah, and it does. It makes you go, okay, what are you doing about that?
That's
Yeah,
right. And in their case, their church is working to provide beds and other things for formerly unhoused people and refugees. But it just grabbed me as a short way to wrap my head around something.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And can you see that the great thing about all of these so far is they're short. They don't actually tell you a whole lot. You couldn't walk away from that sentence and think, I really know anything more about this group. You have to say, what does that mean? What else does that mean? But you want to know. That's the whole thing. You want to know. Fran, did you have your hand up? Okay, can you unmute, please?
I'm the one who does the beds. I was just the one who Elizabeth was talking about.
Oh, okay. All right. That's you. Well done.
That's me.
Well done. We're proud of you.
Tarn has his hand up.
Tarn, how about you?
Yes, I've belonged to quite a few nonprofit organizations, one of which is the Rotary Club of Wallingford, Connecticut. And Rotaries, all Rotarians believe in service above self. And all the money that we raise, which is a lot of money every year, goes all back into the community. So we don't take and run with the money we take and put it back into this place where we live.
Yeah. No, and the Rotarians set a very good example, service above self. It's, in every Rotary, and I believe I've been to a number of Rotary meetings over the years. I believe you actually start your luncheons with that, right?
Sometimes.
Yeah. So, and it's, it's great to kind of rally the troops with your mission statement. Okay, so anyone else wanted to share theirs? Don't be intimidated. That was quite a string of really excellent ones. That was great. Naomi.
Sure, I can jump in with mine. We believe that childhood should be shaped by people who love children and not by corporations who want lifelong customers.
Okay, so that's an analysis. That's an example of where you took a whole analysis and narrowed it down to one sentence. It's very good. Yeah, and it draws people, and it kind of contrasts, and it makes people think. Yeah. So Thanks. You can see there's a bunch of examples. There's kind of the human rights frame. People should have deserve housing. They deserve this. They deserve. That's kind of a human rights frame. That's fine. There's the big claim where you actually name something really huge that you're going to do. There's the kind of heart first. They're all legitimate. They're all useful. But you can see how I think if we had time, all of us would be like, oh, I'd like to know more about that group. And that's exactly what we want to do. Any other comments about the case, or questions or concerns about it? All right, then I'm going to go back to the screen here, and we're going to move on. Now we're going to try to move on. If our computer will not be stuck, that would be great. So the third side of the frame is this notion of kind of strategies, that you need to have a lot of different strategies. And next week, we're going to take this up in much more detail. But you know, you can see the strategies go on this very individual notion where you have a very high rate of success. Asking somebody for money in person is a very high rate of success. The chances they will say yes to something are pretty high, to down to mass email or direct mail, where, you know, 1%, 0.5% response is considered very good. But of course, you can reach a lot more people. One-to-one is very labor intensive. I put a star beside social media and special events because special events in particular can be very in-person driven. I mean, you go to a person, you say, would you sponsor this event? Or to a business, would you sponsor this event? And oftentimes the profit in a special event, even though it's a mass strategy, the profit in it has come largely from a few people. So there's no, I have to, because of the nature of PowerPoint, write these in a list, but in real life, there's a lot of crossover there. And this is the kind of ending of that particular principle, that a really healthy organization has a lot of different sources of money. They have a lot of donors. They don't just have one big donor. They have a lot of donors. That money is unrestricted. It's used however you want. They may have some products or fees. They could have government. I mean, this is just a sample listing. There's all different kinds of ways to raise money. But in order to have a lot of different sources of money, you have to have people helping you to raise that money. There is no such thing as a healthy organization with one or two people raising all its money. It just can't happen. Those people could go out to lunch together and get hit by a bus. I mean, it's just dangerous. So you want to spread the work of fundraising over as many people as you can possibly manage. All right, so let's look at that as our fourth principle: build a strong board. And why a board? You know, I think whoever invented the notion of boards, but it wasn't one person, it probably came out of many groups. I think it was this genius invention, because you have thousands of nonprofits. Well, actually right now you have 1.7 million nonprofits. Each of them is required to have a board. The Internal Revenue Service, and probably you just saw one of the first acts of the new House under its weird leader, Kevin McCarthy, is to defund the Internal Revenue Service. So the IRS does not have the staff power to look at each nonprofit and see, are you using your money properly? So they had this brilliant, sort of counterintuitive idea. How can we figure out if a nonprofit is raising enough money to fulfill its mission, which, remember, is part of it. You have to raise enough money to fulfill your mission, and is spending the money properly. How can we possibly do that? They go, we have this great idea. Let's take a group of people who love that mission, who care deeply about that organization, and let's tell them their job is to make sure the money, because they will have the most investment in making sure the money is raised and spent properly. And that group of people, they gave legal responsibility. That is the board of directors. The advantages of having a C3, this comes back to Kate's earlier question, they're under a church right now, they might become an independent C3, but the advantages of being a nonprofit, there are a lot of different kinds of nonprofits, but of being a 501c3, which most people here are, and then in Canada, I apologize to my Canadian friends, I've forgotten exactly what your tax status is called. But anyway, you can offer tax deductibility for donations. Again, not particularly attractive anymore since the Trump, it's not been attractive for a long time, but particularly in the Trump tax reform, 85% of people file a short form. So that's a very, very limited to wealthy people. But you can apply for funding. Private foundations are not allowed to fund groups that are not 501c3. So you have all access to all that money. You avoid taxes if you own property, for example, and the property is used for tax exempt purpose. You don't pay property tax. So where I live, the city of Berkeley, 40% of the property in the city of Berkeley is tax exempt. That puts a big, that throws a lot of responsibility onto homeowners. But those of us who live here, and I think people here live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and other places where you have a lot of universities, libraries, museums, and so on, we think it's worth it for the cultural benefit that comes with having these kind of nonprofits there. But it's not cheap. So In some states, you don't pay sales tax. So that's a big advantage. So the government recognizes that to be a nonprofit means we do work that cannot be done for profit. That's our work. We do work that needs to be done and it cannot be done for profit. So the government tries to subsidize us and help in a way to subsidize what we do by helping us avoid taxes. Consequently, every taxpayer in America, which is every person pays some kind of tax. Every taxpayer is subsidizing every group. I am subsidizing groups that I don't agree with, and they in turn are subsidizing me, okay? So what we have to kind of know is, at least, even if I don't agree with them, I think they spend their money properly. I don't think they abuse it. That's really important. Probably the biggest advantage of having a 501c3, having an actual tax exempt status, is that the donors think, oh, the government has looked at this and they must think it's okay. So that's the board. So just to go back to this, there is a legal frame. When you're a board member, you take on legal responsibility. If something happens in the organization, if suddenly in your organization, somebody decides to steal all the money you have in the bank, and go, I don't know, like, well, let's say Hillary decides to steal all the money at the UU funding program, right? And where would you get to, Hillary? If you went on the bus, could you get to Florida?
And I'd be going to Florida. Why?
No, you'd probably take a plane to New Mexico or something. Anyway, she runs off with the money. They don't come looking for her. They come looking for the chair of her board. And they say to that person, how did this happen? How did Hillary? And what we want that person to say is, I don't know. I don't know how it happened. I can't imagine, because we had 2 signatures on every check. We had an audit. We had a bookkeeper. We had all these checks and balances in place, and they're very, very puzzled by how could it have happened. That's what the IRS is looking for. That there will always be some person who's very clever and diabolical and will get away with stuff. But that your goal is to make sure that that isn't true in your group. Okay. So, and I know Hillary would never take any money from any organization. So the role of, it follows that it's very logical to me that it follows that if you have this legal responsibility and you agree to it, you care enough about the group, you're willing to take that risk collectively with the other board members, that one of the ways you would prove that you care about the group is you would give money yourself. You wouldn't give money to a group where you thought the money wasn't being well used. And in fact, the IRS, when they look at organizations and they're trying to figure out if somebody embezzles money, and they're trying to figure out, did the board know, which board members knew, and when did they know it? They will look partly at when they gave their money. Did they give money and when they gave it? And they will say, if they gave money, they probably had no idea, because they wouldn't have given money if they thought something was going on. So you make your own gift. You test the proposition the organization is worth supporting against your own gift, make your own gift, and then you go out and you try to raise money. And you help develop fundraising strategy, you set fundraising policies. This is just your job with regard to fundraising. You have also a much bigger job. You hire and fire the executive director. You make sure the organization is mission focused. I mean, being a board member is not a small thing. It's a big job. And I met somebody the other day, and he's who is retired, but he said, I'm on 10 boards. I thought, that's insane to take that kind of responsibility for 10 groups. That's nuts. 2 groups, 3 groups, maybe, but so that is your job. Now, can you imagine that this is not, it's sort of surprising to me, but this is not always perceived as good news by the board members. They're like, I don't want to raise money. They'll often give money. That's usually not such a problem, but they don't want to raise money. And that's again why we go back to this thing of a wide variety of strategies. If you have a lot of different ways that people can raise money, people will find a method that works for them. Not, some people will never do face-to-face fundraising. They just don't like it. They won't do it. There's no point in fighting with them about it. Get them to do post something on Facebook. Get them to write thank you notes. Get them to take tickets at the special event. I mean, anything you do is a task that needs to be done. It's not everybody has to do the same thing, but everybody has to do some things. I really like, and I found a lot of groups like, to have where the the board has some kind of commitment form. Each board member actually says what they're going to do. And this is an example. So Cecilia says, I'm going to contribute $500. I'm going to host a virtual house party. I'll participate in the phone bank, and I will ask 5 people to give $500. Okay. And that's what she'll do. That's actually a lot. That's a big commitment. And when she does that, when she has done all that, she is done. She cannot be asked to do more. So having this commitment is helpful for the development people, it's helpful for the fundraising plan, and it's also helpful for Cecilia because she doesn't feel, she knows that this was enough. This was enough stuff to do. So I really suggest having those commitment forms. I wonder, let me just, let's see. I wonder if any of you have, you want to just raise your hands. Now you can raise your virtual hand or your real hand. If you have something like a commitment form like that, where each person makes their own plan. All right, I'm just running through the screens here. And not seeing it. Okay, so either that's a brilliant idea that you'll implement right away, or it's a really dumb idea and that's why nobody has it. Okay, Shannon, yes, go ahead. Oh, Shannon maybe has a commitment form. Maybe that's what she meant. So somebody wrote, is it really as simple as what you put on that slide? Yeah, it is. I'm on a couple boards and I have a commitment form that could fit on a piece of scratch paper, right? I mean, it doesn't need to be a long notarized document. And I think it allows people to kind of, when you make them in front of everybody in the board, each person kind of says, this is what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. And people get ideas from each other. Somebody said, Allison, I think some education is required so they know what options might be. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Allison. That's exactly right. You can't expect people to know this out of the clear blue sky. They need to have a set of choices. I have actually, maybe I'll put it in the Google Doc. This menu, there was the Hawaii People's Fund, which is a great client of mine. They developed this menu. So it was the appetizers and the main course and the dessert. And it was all these different things you could do for fundraising. So I will put that in the chat. All right. Let's go back here. All right. So this is Cecilia. Yeah, simple, kind of simple. Sometimes people have also, in some organizations I've really liked where people have, and we'll talk about this next week, a portfolio of donors. So sometimes I'm on a board like that where I have 7 donors I'm responsible for. I have to thank them. I have to ask them for money, but I also have to keep in touch with them. I send them stuff. I know them a little bit. And this is a really great way to handle donors. So you don't have to, development people don't have to work with every donor by themselves. It spreads over the whole organization. It's really terrific. All right. So our little final, what time is it? Let me see if we have time for this. Yeah, we do. We have like 5 minutes. Our little final breakout is to look at that frame. So again, reminding ourselves of the frame. You have to have a clear case. You need to have a wide variety of strategies and people to help you with that, including a really strong board of directors. Actually, we could just go back and look at the, whoops. Nope, I'm suddenly here. I was just saying to myself, you're doing so well. So you should never say that is really the long and the short of it. Let's go back to this. This frame, the notion that your goal of fundraising is building relationships. You have a case, you have a wide range of strategies and a wide range of people, and you distribute the fundraising task widely, starting with the board. The board sets an example. It's also true the executive director sets an example. The board members are very sharp, and I've seen them. One time a board member said to me, the ED doesn't like fundraising. And I was like, oh, that's too bad. And he goes, and if she won't do it for pay, I'm not doing it for free. And I thought that was pretty funny. So the ED does have to set a good example for fundraising. So I want you to move into just a very short breakout. We'll just take about 5 minutes for this. And we don't have 10 minutes, so ignore that. We'll take 5 minutes and kind of think about what are you doing well and what are the most important course corrections you need to make. And I'll just give you a little heads up that what I want you to look at for next week is who's on your team, who's on your fundraising team. We're going to kind of move with that in next week. And this is another way to kind of understand it, to new people coming into your group, give them something meaningful to do, but not scary, and let them work their way up to the harder and harder strategies. So that people don't stay doing the same thing all the time. That's why I think a lot of times board members like to be on the special event committee, because it's a committee, it's several people, it's a bunch of people. This will be your homework, just to give you a heads up before we move into the breakout. What are your main takeaways? Who can be on your team? And we will start next week with some feedback on that. So let's just move into that, and we'll just take about 5 minutes and we'll come back together in groups of 4 very quickly. Critically important in my view, you know, really, really important. And I think people don't
Yeah.
always understand that it costs money.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, for some people, public art is that, you know, that is the most art they will see, art that's available out to the public. So
Yeah. That's so true. It's the only art it's true. And it's very equitable. And we focus a lot on the south and west sides of Chicago, where there's lots of divestiture. And it's made such a difference for those communities that everyone should live in a nice place. And it just uplifts communities and makes them feel pride, instills pride and ownership in their community, and also encourages community investment,
absolutely,
economic investment. So
no, I worked at well, it was a museum. It was a free museum one time, and they had an art museum, and their motto was, "We believe in the power of art to change the world." And it was just like, I was like, yes, that's such a great claim. I love that. And it's true, and it's true. Art does change the world, you know. And public art is so. I mean, making art so that it's not the purview of who can own it. The public owns it, right?
Right.
All right, is everybody back now? All right. I apologize. I got a little confused about the time. We do actually have more time, which is great, because there's a couple more things I want to cover. But before we go into the final part of our time together, thank you, dear. Was anyone willing to share, like, where do you think, when you think of this frame, where do you think you're really strong? And don't be afraid to brag on yourselves, because, you know, that's helpful. And where do you find some weakness? And remember, every organization has problems. If you don't have a problem, you're not a group. If you don't have a problem, you're dead. That's who doesn't have problems. So problems are just information. Problems tell you, oh, better fix that problem. And you know what happens also when you fix one problem, you get another problem. Like last year was a group that had no staff. This was their problem. They were like, we have no staff. We're all burned out. We're these volunteers. We have no staff. So then I was in touch with them over the year. They got staff. You know what? They solved their problem of no staff. So now what's their problem? Staff. They have staff. Now they have to supervise them. They have to, you know, pay them, have to deal with them. And it's just, I was like, okay, you solved one problem, got another. That's what makes life exciting, right? If you can kind of just think about it, it's like, oh, that's exciting. What's the next problem? So, okay, Marjorie, problem or solution or both? Go ahead.
Yeah, so sticking with the metaphor of the frame, we have really good wood pieces. We've got 4 of them. They're a great shape. Our weakness is the joinery between the 4. So the internal structures, so that we're really tracking information across different strategies. We can say, you know, what one person's relationship arc with the organization, and we can guide them through that. Someone in the small group said, you need a CRM. And I was like, we've got a CRM, but the practice of like really using those tools and keeping them updated is our challenge.
Yeah.
Tiny little grassroots organization doing a great job, but systems are a challenge.
Systems are always a challenge, even in actually bigger groups, but especially in tiny little groups. And, and once you get I know people think, oh, if we had a CRM, our problem would be solved, but then you have to think, what are you going to put in it? And you don't, you're not the CIA, you don't put in that much information, but you put in the right information and who has access to it. Yeah, it's a discipline. Thanks. I like that. I never thought of that. I'll probably steal it and use it in the future. That idea of what joins the pieces together. That's very, very good. Jess.
So I'm a very new organization. We got tax deductible status like 2 months ago.
Wow.
And I think that I'm doing pretty well on the case and also on actually actually having conversations. And where I definitely need work is figuring out how to involve my board. It's sort of like all new, so I have a lot of hesitancy and not wanting to ask them to do too much or something, and trying to figure out how to actually just get that going is probably the biggest bucket.
Okay, so figuring out how to use the board, how to engage them. So I don't want to. Do you mind if I just push on you just a little bit, because you said something I think will be very helpful to everyone else. You said I think you said, so tell me if I'm wrong. I don't necessarily want to ask them. You said something like that, right?
I feel anxiety about asking them. I think I want to ask them and I don't want to ask them. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I think a lot of us feel the same, and we kind of don't want to impose, and we're kind of grateful that they even agreed to be on the board, but they don't know what to do. And so they kind of wait to be told, and then you kind of feel anxious. So I would say in the next week, I would just challenge you to ask each of them to do something. And even if they say no, they'll be actually really happy to be invited, right? So that'll be your and that's just a habit we have to get into, is letting people is inviting people to do stuff and letting them decide what they're going to do. But thanks for sharing. Yeah, that's a lot of people. That's a very big problem in startups. Jan, how about you?
Yes, Jess, I wanted to respond to Jess because I had the same problem when I started a nonprofit about 15, 20 years ago. And my problem was that I was feeling like a person asking them to do it for me, but it's really about asking them to do it for the mission, for the teens that we were trying to help. And that was something that, as someone who wasn't trained in anything for nonprofits, kind of went over my head for too long a while. But I think feeling guilty about asking people, it's not for you, it's for the mission, it's for what you guys are caring about. So think of it that way and lose the guilt.
Yeah, because it's important. And the other thing to keep in mind is, this isn't true of everybody. Most people, I think, we prefer to be invited. If you think about when your feelings are hurt, it's pretty rarely like, oh, my feelings are so hurt, I'm super upset because I got invited to the party. It's much more common that would be like, I wasn't invited, I feel left out. And the other thing that we'll get into this next week a little bit, but this is kind of a sad thing about about people in general, but you will never go wrong if you take into account that very few people have the kind of self-esteem they should have relative to who they are, relative to the magnificent person that's there. Most people, their self-esteem is a quarter of a teaspoon, and they don't. And that's when we say, oh, why didn't anyone volunteer for this? It's not because they didn't care or they didn't want to. It's because they didn't think they could do it. And one of the jobs in social justice fundraising, I think, is to invite people to do something they didn't think they could do, and give them that experience. Wow, I did that. Wow, I asked for the money. I set up a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign. I figured out the database. I was able to, and that kind of confidence, that's partly how we build organizations, we build power, and we build the notion that, we can do this. We can do this. We don't need to look to someone else. So if you kind of just think of it as doing them, they're doing them a little bit of a favor. You're kind of bringing them in. Okay, Jackie.
So much food for thought in this session today. Thank you. I think there in a lot of ways we're doing well in our purpose and case and strategies. And I know for sure for me, from my perspective, our board is our weak link, and it's it feels like, and this is not the first organization that I've been involved with, and so where this is the problem. And so I'm really struggling. Feels like the people who are on the board are bench warmer cheerleaders, who are sort of half in, half out. And we're lucky to get their attention. And it's hard as heck to recruit and onboard new board members. We're really, really struggling with that. Because the people, the main organization that I work for, but even the congregation that I'm involved with, people are as involved as they want to be. Thank you very much. And how do you deal with that when they're like this? It's thank you for the invitation, but no thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to pretend that that's easy. I'm not going to pretend that's easy. So when I offer ideas, I know they'll be much easier for me to say than for any of you to do. But I think really one of the things I think we don't use nearly enough when we talk to other people is inquiry. So we invite, would you consider being on the board? My plate is full. I can't. And you held up your hand, Jackie, like this. It's true. Like you almost have this image. It's almost like they put on one of those face shields that we were wearing early on in COVID. Like no, and so you don't want to push further. But I will often push slightly more just to say, is there anything that would need to be true for you to be willing to say yes? Is there anything different? I mean, I can't do anything different about your life and how many kids you have and your job and all your responsibilities, that, but is there anything that would need to be different that would allow you to consider that? And sometimes there's not. It's just not possible. And I think all of us have that. We know that there's a point at which we cannot take on one more thing, even if it's walking a dog across the street. Like, no, I cannot take that 12 seconds and do that. It's not possible. It's just, we're just swamped. But sometimes it's amazing that sometimes it's something that could be really fixed. Like about 6 months ago, I had this conversation with someone. I said, what would cause, and I thought it was going to be this really heavy conversation about the racial and gender makeup of this board and stuff. And the person I was talking to said, I can't meet during the day. Like how I felt really bad. I felt like, how obvious would that be? They work. They can't meet during the day. And they were like, if you would meet on Saturday, I would definitely do it. And I was like, oh my God, I made this story in my mind, this drama of, all this systemic oppression. And for the person, it's just like, I work, So sometimes it's a very simple solution. If you just made this one change or that one change. Sometimes you find out, I don't 100% agree with the direction you're going. And that's interesting information because you're like, oh, who else thinks like that? And why is that? And what direction do you think we're going? Maybe we haven't communicated it properly. So, but the other thing I really suggest is really, really look around in your community, your congregation, amongst your donors, and see if there are people. There's always a handful of people that never get asked to do stuff. People just overlook them. And, there's a few people that get asked to do everything. And there's a group that doesn't get asked to do anything. And it's just kind of a fluky, they don't put themselves forward. They're maybe a little bit shy. They may be newer, something about them, but look around. And then if you really honestly are having a really hard time recruiting new board members, is to go, you have to also fix the board you have. Like you said, some people were bench warmers. I'm not trying to rag on you, Jackie. This is true. If we look around the screen, you can see a bunch of people are nodding their head. They need to go. Like, you know, you only have to have 3 board members to be inside the IRS guidelines. The IRS says there have to be 3 people on the board. So sometimes people will say, I only, you know, I have 11 board members, but 5 of them do nothing. Well, you know what's true? You have 6 board members. You only have 6 board members. You have 5 potted plants, right? They need to, so there has to be some conversation, because people are not attracted to a board where they feel like, I don't know, that group isn't exciting. They're not exciting. It's better for you to kind of really narrow it down. I will also say this: if you have a lot of problems with your in a board right now, is to know that it can take really up to 2, even if with serious discipline, it can take up to 2 years to really solve them. It's not that easy. People are bringing all their family stuff. They're bringing all their other stuff. Sometimes the executive director is a little bit of the problem, you know, so be patient and give yourself time, but yeah, but approach the whole thing with inquiry. What's the problem? What would make it exciting to be on our board? What would make people choose it? Because there are boards that people clamor to be on. They would love to be on, and they agree to all kinds of things in order to be on them. What do they have going for them? It's sort of interesting sometimes to look. Patty.
Yeah, I'm speaking from my own experience here and saying that the problems that I've had with boards in the past is that often they can be a black box. In other words, nobody really tells you what the board members are responsible for before you get there.
Yes.
And even after you get on the board, you're still not very clear about what the board members are supposed to do. So I'm wondering if people would be more available for boards if somebody could really explain to them ahead of time what their responsibilities are and what the limitations to their responsibilities are. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second is I've been on a board where I was asked if I would help with fundraising, and then found out I was the chair of the fundraising committee and needed to find all of my own committee members that were not on the board. So I'm really excited about this whole board member commitment form idea and spreading the fundraising out to the entire board as a way of doing it, rather than, you know, having one board member that's responsible to make sure that fundraising happens. So thank you for this whole session, but especially that.
Well, thanks. Yeah. I just really have to laugh because even though it's horrible for you, but that happens so often. Like the person is asked to be, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have had this experience when somebody's asked to be on the board, you go to your first board meeting and you leave and like, you're the chair. Because you had, I don't know, you had the most sign of life. Your blood pressure was above 0 or something. And, you know, this does not build a healthy board. And when you go to a board and the brand new people are doing all the work, and, you know, they're not, they look around and they think I could be on this board by raising money or by not raising money. I think I won't. Or I could be on this board, even more extreme, I could be on this board by attending the meetings or not attending the meetings. You know, it doesn't matter. No one's ever going to hold me accountable. I just actually this morning was on this actually raises another question, which is not part of the curriculum, but I'm just, because people have brought it up, I want to just flag it briefly, and I wish we had more time to go into it more deeply, or maybe if people want to, we can in another session. But I was just on a webinar about intentional communities, and it's this huge study of what makes intentional communities work, why do they split up, and so on, and how satisfied people are who live in them. And this is then there was much information, but one piece of information I thought was so amazing is how the communities, there's a large part of the study, how the communities handle conflict and how they hold each other accountable to do things. And in the communities where if there's a conflict or a disagreement, between even two people or many people, where they have mandatory conflict resolution. A third person comes in, talks to everybody, gets everything out, and they have mandatory conflict resolution. 95% of those community members, people living in those communities, said that they were satisfied, they loved living in their community. And in the communities where there was no accountability, where no one told you what you had done, it was just kind of a general sense that things were falling apart. Of course, there was very little satisfaction. And I think we can learn this a lot. A lot of us are, you know, conflict avoid. I mean, I don't think, you know, people say, oh, so-and-so is conflict avoid. And I think, well, no one loves, very few people love conflict. I mean, I once had a cat who loved to, seemed to love to fight. But honestly, I think very few people just rush forward to be in conflict. That's not it. But we do have to be able to speak honestly with each other. And the other thing is that boards change. Like what the kind of people that helped start an organization, like who was we talking to? Was just starting an organization. The kind of people are attracted to startup and want to kind of create the vision and pull it together. And it's very grassroots and everybody does everything. And, you know, those kind of people will drop out once the organization has staff, it's a little bit more stable. The programs are a little bit more in place. Then a new group is attracted. Then those people will drop out once the thing is, starts to run into problems with the program. The program is no longer that relevant. The board is now being challenged in a variety of ways. They need to raise more money. That group will begin to drop back and some other people will come in. And so people that may have been very, very active become bench warmers. But that's why we have terms on boards and stuff so that we can really force that what is a very natural progression from one type of person to another. Boards need different kinds of people at different times. But yeah, some kind of honest discussion is really, really important, and it takes time. So let's see, in the chat we have here, it's hard to get volunteers for anything right now. This is true. This is actually borne out by the study, this independent sector study that I just got today, that there's been a 20% drop in volunteers through COVID. That's a lot. 1/5 of our volunteers have dropped off. So that's really not good. What is the best board resource to lay out the ideal board, culture, engagement, development role? And somebody has suggested the Nonprofit Center for Advancement. That's a really good one. You know, very traditional organization called Board Source, but they have very, very good, materials, I think. What are term limits that foster positive change? Someone has asked. I think, you know, I personally like a lot. I mean, I think it can work. You know, let me back up. When you've seen one board, you've seen one board. Okay, so everybody's got to figure that out for themselves. But in general, I would say over all the boards that I've been on, I have liked very much the ones where you came on for a 2-year term and you could renew for 3 years. And so you could be on 5 years and all, and then you were off. You had to take a year break, and then you could come back on. So I worked a lot in rural communities. You don't have enough people to say people are permanently off. Yeah, or you would run out of people. But I think 5 years, 5 or 6 years is a really good amount of time. And that seems to do the trick. Is the drop in volunteers due to organizations not having remote opportunities? I think yes, very, very much so. And also that the remote opportunities aren't that fun. It's just not that fun to be on Zoom endlessly. So yeah, and many groups have not been able to pivot properly. But I also do think that people are not being asked to do things. And I think also we're experiencing baby boomers pulling back, a tiny little generation, not enough people in that generation, and then a much bigger generation that's much younger, and we may not have, and the organization itself may not be as appealing to millennials. That's you know, there's big culture shifts between boomers and Gen X and millennials. And of course, those culture shifts are partly racial, partly, like here in California, very much immigration. Like if you're really going to build a board with a lot of millennials, you're going to have a lot of immigrants on the board. That's the nature of who's filling out that population. So those are changes. All right. Anyone else want to comment on their frame? I think it's a worthwhile. I think it's kind of a fun thing to actually sometimes even have it in your mind or even in physically a frame and think what, when you have a problem in your group, something's coming up and like, this is a problem. I think what's the problem here? Is it the board? Is it that we don't have enough strategies? Is it we're not clear about our mission? What is the actual problem? And be sure that you actually you don't solve a problem you don't have. You actually analyze the problem and solve the right problem. All right, Shelley.
Yeah, I think we do a good job of engaging our board. One thing that we've had an issue with is that I'm just like a one-person development department, and we have a rather large budget and donor base. And we've just had a problem recruiting a director of development. And I think we're a social justice nonprofit in the AAPI space, so kind of looking for a little bit of a unicorn maybe has been maybe one contributing factor. But do you have any comments about kind of the dearth of people in development right now?
It's really bad. I mean, I don't think, it might be you're looking for a unicorn, but I think you're also just up against what a lot of people are, that there just aren't that many people in the pipeline. And I really advise people you can't find these people even for huge money. So make them, create them, take excited people who want to learn this. This is how I got into fundraising. No one says when they're 12, I want to be in fundraising. We all backed into it. We all were put on the committee, the one meeting that we missed. I mean, some trick happened. That's how we got into fundraising. That's practically everybody's story. So create them, and I really recommend to groups that they promote from within instead of always they look. An organization, their tendency right now, especially with this, what I think is a huge industrial complex of search firms, is to look outside and to imagine if we only went further out, or paid more, we could find our person. And the really fact is, Shelley, there may not be such a person for you in your space, but I'm willing to bet they are in that space somewhere, in that big donor base, in the board, in the people that hang around. The other thing is
they're trying to grow me into one of those, and I'm like, oh, I don't know.
well, you don't have to, you don't have to agree to be the person that grows into it, but someone could. Someone could slightly like you, but slightly different, willing to do it. The other is to look for some alternative structures. I mean, we're very, very tied into this ED, development director, very traditional structure, but maybe you have 3 development director, maybe you have people in charge of different aspects of development, or maybe you just have an entirely different structure. There's all kinds of options that I think are more attractive. I worked on this search for an executive director of an organization, and I suggested to them that they go with a co-director model. No, that no one likes that. And so we went with this ED model, and we had very few applicants, and it wasn't really that great. And then this friend of mine is running this organization and was consulting this organization in Seattle, and they went with a 3 co-director model. They were hiring 3 people, 3 separate people. They didn't have to know each other. You could apply as a threesome. Some people did, but they didn't have to know each other. And they had 173 applicants for that. Wow. Because that's where the excitement is. The excitement is in something new, something different, something not where that one person holds all this responsibility. Let's see. We're beginning to run out. I want to catch this. Can you say a couple more sentences about the frame related to the purpose of fundraising? Is it a binary? No. It's strong if you're prioritizing relationships, or not strong if you're just prioritizing money? Yes. Well, in that sense, it is a binary. You have to prioritize relationships. It's about relationships. If all you want is money, then don't be doing this kind of fundraising. Yeah, then start a little business or something like that. I mean, but this kind of fundraising is about expanding your mission. Each person who gives you money is also a witness to your organization. In fact, we know this in even the way people describe themselves. They'll describe themselves by an organization. They'll say, I'm strictly ACLU on that, right? I'm very free speech. I really believe I'm strictly ACLU on that. Or I'm, call me Greenpeace, but blah, blah, blah. It's kind of these iconic organizations become practically identities. That's That's what you want, that kind of relationship where people, they see it when they're describing, when someone says, "Oh, I've never met you before, tell me a little bit about yourself." The ideal for you, from your point of view, is they would say, "I belong to the UU Church in Taunton. I'm very much involved in rural organizing. I love the rural organizing project." Right? I mean, that the name of your group and the work of your group is part of how they see themselves. That's what you want. Does that make sense? That's why the relationships are so important. The money is not going to do that for you. All right, I'm going to finish up just a couple things here. So we talked about this a little bit. I'm going to expand on this next week about building a fundraising team, really bringing a lot of people on. It does not only have to be the board. It can be other donors. It can be people who do. We had one group I'm on the board of. They do a big Giving Tuesday. I would just say I don't love Giving Tuesday, but many people do. And I was amazed at how many people were willing to do the Giving Tuesday, do the peer-to-peer fundraising, start like 2 weeks ahead, get all their friends to give, be on Tuesday and sending 8,000 messages along with all the other groups that are doing the same thing. And they liked it, and then they're done. And there was something about that was really nice. So we kind of short-term things, long-term things, stuff that requires more being friends with people, stuff that requires less, kind of looking around who can be on your team. My computer just froze. And I had talked about this a little bit earlier, coming back to it. You have people on your board that they'll just say, "I don't like fundraising." People say this all the time. "I don't like fundraising." So I have two responses to that. One is, "I don't care." Who cares? Really? I don't like it. This is your reason for not doing it. I don't even get the relationship. You love the organization. You love the mission. One of the things the group needs is money. One of the things the group needs is donors. Do your job. All of life isn't about everything you do from morning till night. It's stuff you like. I find that so pathetic. And the other thing I find when people say, "I don't like fundraising," is, what do you mean by that? You don't like to stuff an envelope? You don't like to thank somebody? You don't like to phone people? You don't like to sit down in front of someone and ask for $1 million? What is it that you don't like? Let's be specific. You don't have to do the things you don't like. Let's try to find something you like. Right? Fundraising is a series of 10,000 tasks. Surely there's one that you must like in there. Okay. So one is kind of taking the ego out of it. Stop thinking, "I don't like it." No one cares what you like or don't like. And the second is, find something you actually can imagine yourself doing and help people with that, and see them in the same way we see our donors on a trajectory or on a pipeline. We see also our board members, our volunteers, and the same thing. They start with something simple, they move to something harder. And it's very systematic the way you build that. So this is your homework. We will start next week with feedback on this homework. The other thing I want to say is next week we'll be joined by this woman named Haley Bash, and she is a real expert in digital and online fundraising. She'll share some information from a study she had, but basically it's going to be a kind of a question and answer. So for those of you who have a lot of questions about your online presence, how you can expand your online fundraising, how you can expand your digital fundraising, what have you done now, what's worked, what hasn't, those are the questions you can bring to Haley. You can send them to me ahead of time and I'll send them to her. We will not so much, I do want to say this, not so much be talking about which platforms are best or which databases are best or anything like that, because there's too much happens all the time about that. But this is a more overview kind of thing. I hope you'll be excited about that. And then we will also talk about some other strategies. How you pick your strategy will be the focus of next week. As I said, you are free to email me between sessions. In fact, I sort of like it. It's not like I'm doing you a favor. I like it. I like to think people thought about my workshop between sessions. So that's just it. It kind of flatters me. So if you want to kind of boost my ego, you will write to me with your questions, your concerns, your disagreements, and I will respond. Or, sometimes there's something very particular about your group you didn't want to share in front of the group, is fine. And do take time to go to the Google Doc. I'll keep putting stuff in there that might be useful to you. All right, any final questions or comments? Yes, when it says who you'll share this information with, yeah, who in your organization will you talk to about this workshop and what you've learned and how the organization can move with it. Jan, you're muted there.
Could you direct us to the link to the Google Doc?
It's apparently, Fia, am I right? It's in the where you had your link, your Zoom link. It's in there. It's in that same
Okay.
email. Mhm.
Thank you.
All right. I will plan to see you next week at this exact same time. And I'll plan to hear from some of you, I hope. And we will have a really good time. And it's been really fun to be with you. And I thank everyone who hung in there. And I know we went through a lot of information, but it'll get a little easier as we go. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much, Kim.